Let's have a look at a few scenarios that we haven't seen at all of the Vienna, so that we can finally close this very long saga forever. So after knight c6 and f4, let's look at the variation when they take straight away. Now in the past we've seen already something like that. We play knight f3, and after bishop e7 and bishop to c4, bishop to h4 check, we know we have to play king f1, we've seen it before, d6 and d4 comes now. Obviously, it looks like our position is terrible. Black now plays bishop g4, pinning the knight. We're going to recapture in f4. And in the past, we went through knight f6 now. Let's look at this other variation, which is important because it does happen a lot. And it's knight g to e7. The reason is that when you have a bishop in f4, black wants to play knight e7, knight g6 with an attack on the bishop. So we go on with queen to d2. And now two options we're going to look at. One of them is bishop back to f6 for the simple reason that we're attacking it right now. And the other one is knight to g6, continuing development, threatening to take the bishop pair, and the queen is protecting the bishop. So, well, let's see. Let's start with this one actually. Knight to g6. Okay, take the bishop. And if black takes the knight back, bishop g5 wins the game, right? This is a simple fork. You go into great advantage. You're up a piece. So obviously, now the knight. Well, if the knight takes the bishop instead, you're also winning because you're going to take the knight back. You're up a piece. Black recapturing the piece means you're just going to play h3 and you're going to take the bishop for free. Now you might argue that the pawn in h3 is pinned, so you're going to take with the queen. So that means that black can try to defend it with h5. But the problem remains after you play king to g1. Now your king is defending the rook, so that means you're threatening, you are going to win the bishop for real. There's no compensation, there's no like intermediate move like knight takes pawn in d4 because you can't, the knight isn't really going anywhere to e2. It's not a problem. You're going to take the bishop, you got an attack on the queen. So what if instead of knight d4, which obviously doesn't work, what if g5, try to counterattack like that? Let's not forget that we have an attack on f7 first. So obviously it's completely winning at this point. This leads us back in this position. We mentioned how knight takes knight and knight takes bishop, they both lose the game. What happens after queen takes knight? Okay, now bishop to g5 attacks the queen. The queen will have to move. Only square will be queen to h5 and now h3. And we're winning once again. If black castles, obviously exploiting the fact that this pawn is pinned, then we play knight to d5. And after, obviously we're attacking the square c7 now. So even if black defends it, let's say rook a to c8, you play king to f2. h6 attacking the bishop. Bishop to f6. This bishop cannot be taken because knight f6 wins the queen. At the moment, after king to f2, we're now threatening to take this bishop. So if the bishop goes away, let's say bishop to d7, you play g4. And that wins material. And there's no compensation if you do this. It's like, you know, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. You gave you gave 2 pawns for a bishop, but you know the opponent queen is quite active, but still you will now take the pawn in g7. With an attack on the rook, you're also threatening the pawn in h6. It's a devastating position. There's no coming back. If king takes here, then you've got an attack on h6. So let's make a recap of this variation. So knight c6, f4, and then they take knight f3. Bishop e7 with immediate attack on h4 diagonal. It's important you play bishop c4 now because it allows your king to move. Check, king moves, d6, d4, bishop g4. Recapture the pawn. Now remember that bishop takes with the idea of taking back the queen and then allowing knight to d4. This is obviously not working because we've seen in the previous videos if bishop takes, you're gonna take back with the pawn. So anyway, the knight e7 variation is the one we're looking at now. Queen to d2, and now let's look at the variation where black goes back with the bishop to save it. Okay, bishop to e3 to put more defense over this pawn in d4. Knight to g6 comes now. h3, attack the bishop. The bishop will have to move backwards. The bishop takes, well, obviously take back. Queen e7. This is a very strong center. That's what you need to understand. It looks like this king is not safe. We've lost the right to castle, and there's quite a few empty squares around the king. However, we are 100% safe. White is better. Knight to d5 comes now with an attack on the queen. That means the queen e7 was not good. The queen will have to move again. Queen to d8. And now you play f4 with the idea of playing e5. Knight to h4 by black. How to respond to such a threat? Ignore it. Rook to d1. Knight can't really go to f3 because well, it's attacking the queen, but then the queen moves and the knight will have to go backwards, so it's achieving absolutely nothing. Knight e7 to try and trade with this knight is not good because you can take the bishop in f6. What about knight to b8? The idea of playing c6 and kicking away our strong knight. Bishop to f2. Okay, c6. And now ignore it. e5. Remember, the idea of f4 is to be able to play e5. And after take, you're going to attack the opponent bishop. But this looks crazy because black can take our knight with an attack on this bishop. But obviously here, we will take the bishop. Then we lose another piece. But now rook e1 check. The king will have to move. Let's say king to f8, for instance. Now you just take the knight in h4. You're going to be able to do that anyway. Look, there's only a limit to how many lines I can cover, how many things we can see. But obviously this is it's just about memorizing the pattern. So this line is this knight g to e7 line. I've encountered it recently, and I just wanted to make a video about it to discuss some of the ideas behind it. Of course, the moves will be different, but you know the plans. That's what matters. So let's change topic for a second. Well, let's look at the variation with the early knight f6. Okay, as we know, f4 works anyway. d5, main line, take. And now, in some of the previous videos, we went through e4, black, and we know what to do next. One of the lines we need to still see is this one. Bishop e5 check. It's the move that comes now. c6. In this variation, we've also explored it in the past. Take, bishop back to c4. And now, we went through plenty of variations, but we need to go through these two. Bishop to c5 and bishop to g4 now, because we haven't seen them. I mean, actually, we have seen, after bishop to c5, we have seen something, but we need to see more. We know we have to play d3 now, but two things we haven't seen are bishop to f5 now, and this very nasty variation that happened to me in a blitz game a few days ago, which is bishop takes g1. So these two are very interesting variations. Look how to deal with them. This is very important. If bishop to g1 with an attack on the knight, you take back, obviously. But now queen to d4 with an attack on the rook, it looks really bad. You just play king to f1, defend the rook. Knight to g4, threaten checkmate. And also threaten the pawn in h2. At this point I was feeling lost, and I thought to myself, how is it possible, since I don't know this variation, how is it possible that I didn't know that black had such a strong initiative? However, I held things together and just came up with a very simple thought. The thought being the fact that I've never explored this line before, I've never seen it before, considering how much I use the engine to evaluate positions and create lines, indicates one thing, and one thing I know I'm sure of. If I haven't seen it before, it means it's wrong. And it doesn't mean I know so much, because I actually don't. It just means that if there are openings and variations that I haven't explored at all, after having played them for so long, it means that they're trash. So I played it cool, and of course I ended up playing the worst move in the position. No, I'm kidding. I played queen to e1 and said, you know what, give me a check, I'm gonna keep running away from the king. And then I've got a bishop developed, the knight is developed, this pawn is not gonna last. My bishop will develop soon, my queen and rooks will be, the rook can go to the h file and be in an open file, and you've got nothing developed. Although, to be fair, I cannot deny I was scared. Anyway, knight to h2 now, attacks the king, check, king moves. And now, two options. If bishop to g4 with check, this looks deadly. But after king to d2, white is completely winning. Because we're going to take an e4, we're going to simplify. Black doesn't have an attack on any of our pieces. No development. So obviously bishop to f5 now, maybe. But still, you just take with the knight. Threaten, discover checks. Also threaten c3. If take, then we can just swap everything. Game over. So in this position, instead of bishop g4 check, what about castle? Now black's king is safe. Okay, well, we've got enough time to play our move now, bishop to e3, and that's it, secure victory. A move like queen to f6 is just met with knight takes pawn in e4, we're completely winning. There is no attack from our opponent because he has no development. A move like queen to d8 is met with rook to h1, attacking the knight will have to move, and now you simply recapture in e4. The white king is safe as one can possibly be. So in this position, instead of queen f6 or queen d8, what if black first of all takes the pawn in d3 to at least make our king weaker? Anyway, bishop to d3. And that's it. We're still attacking the queen. After queen to b4, maybe counter-attacking this pawn. You just play rook to rook to h1, and that's gonna be it. You won the knight. You don't have to worry about the queen going to b2 because she's attacking nothing. Knight moving back means you're gonna take in h7, and you can take the game from there. And now, obviously, the threat is to play. King moves, but then you play bishop d3 check. King moves, and then you play queen to h4, and you're going for checkmate. Black can't play like knight to h6 because he would play queen to g5, threatening to take the knight. It's not something that can be ignored. Like queen taking b2, you take the knight, and then you're threatening. You're threatening. Like let's say queen takes rook, right? You're threatening just to give up the rook. King takes, and then you can go and checkmate, exploiting queen and bishop cooperation. And in this position, after queen to g5, what if black plays queen to d6, putting more protection over that knight? Okay, well, knight to e4 should do the job. The queen will have to move away, and then we can take the knight. If the queen instead tries to stay around like queen to g6 to still defend the knight, then you have knight f6 check. You're going to be discovering an attack on the queen. If the queen instead goes to e6, obviously f6 is not accessible. Then again, you play knight f6 check. If king moves, then you go sacrifice and you just checkmate soon. If instead the queen takes the knight, then you take the queen and then the pawn takes back, and then you can recapture the knight, and then you can recapture the knight, and then you can bring the other rook to play, and the position is evaluated +6. So let's make a recap. So we're looking at the early knight f6 move, f4, d5, main line, okay, take, and e4, okay. Bishop check, c6, take, bishop back. So let's look once again at bishop c5. Now we know we played d3. In the variation with bishop takes knight and rook takes back, we went through queen to d4. Let's just briefly mention that bishop to g4 is not a problem because you play queen to d2. And, e3 can't push. Taking here, it means you just can take back, and there's no compensation. Black has got a worse pawn structure. And for more information, go and watch the videos in which I discuss this quite extensively. If black castles now, it looks scary. It looks like black has got a good attack or something, but you're just taking e4, threaten to swap queens. You're completely safe here. I mean, white is winning. So in this position, after the bishop c5 variation in d3, what if black doesn't play this move, bishop takes knight? Okay, what if bishop to f5? Developing, putting more defense over the e4 pawn, and preparing to castle and play normal moves. Okay, well, taking e4. We don't care about the swap of queens. Let's make an example. Let's say black recaptures, obviously, right? Well, then take. And let's say if black takes you, then you can take with the king even, and bishop takes back. Black has got two well-developed bishops. It's ready to castle. So how is it that we're better? Well, we're up a pawn, and our opponent doesn't have any compensation. Now it's important that we play knight f3. And that's it. We're not going to lose this pawn in g2. And what to do if black tries to at least break our pawn structure? Bishop takes, pawn takes, seems to be making sense. Castle, you play c3 to give the king a potential escape, and then play b4 and advance the pawns on the queen side, because this is the majority we have, 3 against 2. Knight to d7, develop. Bishop to a6, threatening a fork. Typical fork, bishop to b7, attacking pawn and rook, winning the pawn. Rook a to b8, fine. b4 attacks the bishop, bishop to b6, king to c2. Knight to f6, continuing development, threatening to go to d5, a good square, or maybe h5 to put more pressure on f5, on f4. a4 by white, bishop to c7, putting more pressure over f4. Rook to d1. And after knight to h5, finalizing the attack over f4, we play rook to d7. And that's it. We don't care about this pawn because we've conquered the 7th rank. We're attacking the bishop, so after bishop moves, you can even take, and now take the pawn in a7. You don't have to worry about anything here. You don't lose the initiative, even if our opponent plays rook a8, you just take. Bishop to b7, and you should be winning that pawn. Rook to e8, trying to find compensation, maybe rook e2, and then take this pawn, a5. So rook check, king b3, and white is completely winning, as you can tell. One very last mention, very quickly, and then we will go to the next line. So the main line with d5, take e4. Okay, bishop check, c6, take, bishop goes back. If bishop goes to g4 straight away, we just play knight g to e2, and after d3 would be completely fine. Black is simply down a pawn and has a worse pawn structure. There is no compensation. If instead here black develops, let's say, bishop d6, also because in the past we saw bishop c5 and bishop b4 ideas. Bishop to d6 is one of a very normal move here that can happen. It's attacking the pawn in f4, and the bishop will have to develop somewhere. You play d3, and now the bishop is defending it. Any pawn taking here, we've seen in the previous videos, we know what to do. If pawn takes, you take back with the queen, you're completely developed. If black doesn't take the pawn, if he castles, you just take in e4. You're 100% safe. You don't have to worry about rook e8 or any attack, because then you have e5. So black shouldn't castle, should rather take this pawn. You take back, and after castle and bishop to e3, you're just fine. Rook to e8, then castle long. That's it. Up a pawn, better pawn structure as well. Double attack on this bishop. We are forcefully going to trade material and go to a winning endgame. So let's go from the start now, and let's look at something else we haven't seen. It's a very curious line that happened to me in a FIDE Blitz game a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to report it because I was actually confused by it, although of course it was bad. d5 main line, as we know, we take. In the variation where black takes back, we take the pawn for free in e5. Now this leads to a crazy line, and I've made a few videos about this, so go and explore the Vienna saga as good as you can. Knight takes and pawn takes back is met with queen e4 check, king moves, and it's all fine. Now, we went through a lot of things like bishop g4, queen e4 check, and stuff like that, bishop c5. However, the move that needs to be seen now is this one, g5 by black straight away. Now, the idea of the black play is that after knight f3, queen to h5, then black will push the pawn in g4, our knight will be misplaced, the queen will take the pawn in e5, the knight will have to go to an uncomfortable square, and so basically it's very aggressive, but you ignore it, you play d4. Now you've got an amazing pawn structure, and now you've got an amazing center. If black does go on with g4, just to stop knight f3, you play queen e1, you're going to be trading queens, and you're winning this endgame. I mean, honestly, look at your center. It's your position evaluated +2, by the way, so that tells you a lot. If our opponent instead tries to not swap queens, then you play queen h4, queen h5, then you play king to d1. And now obviously a move like g3 with the discovered check and the idea of going to h2 is bad, because you will play bishop e2 with an attack on the queen, and that's going to be it. Now, I want you to understand the reason why this position is evaluated over +2. Even though our king and queen swapped seats with each other, which is really funny, the queen is now in e1, the king in d1, it's weird, we don't have a right to castle. But here's the thing, I'm asking you to find a move for black. Black going to h6 here, or to e7, either way we're going to play knight e2, and then we're going to knight to g3. So let's make an example, bishop to h6, because what else is there to play? I challenge you to find a move for our opponent. Knight c6 isn't going anywhere, there's no future to it. Maybe the bishop. Okay, well fine, I'll show a few examples. Right, so let's look at this move, bishop to h6. Okay, knight to e2, develop. Bishop takes, rook to c1, position evaluated +3. Okay, let's look at this idea instead, bishop e6, the bishop developing. Towards seems to be a fine square, it's attacking this pawn. Maybe we try to go to d5, puts pressure on g2. You take the upper hand with rook to b1, and now if bishop takes, you're going to the 7th rank. From there you're dominating, there's no other move here that are any good. You also threatening knight f4, potentially can swap with this bishop and play bishop b5 check in case our opponent plays a move like b6, for example, would be obviously really bad. If black played bishop to d5, you're completely winning after knight f4, right? So bishop to d5, the idea of protecting his pawn. Okay, what if black does play b6 and you play knight to f4, and when the queen moves to f5 to protect the bishop, you play g3. Okay, knight d7. Did our opponent manage to finally finish their development? Maybe the black player will even dream of castling. h4 by white, position evaluated +5 at this point. This pawn cannot take in h3 because the white's bishop takes h3, Comes with an attack on the queen, the bishop, and position is fantastic. It's completely winning. If black does ignore the pawn in h, then and let's say castles, then bishop to d3. And obviously the queen's got nowhere to go. So you'll have to figure out the tactics, and let's take it from the start. Look, remember, everything that you haven't seen in the Vienna saga so far, I've made more than 30 episodes. If you learn them properly and you memorize as much as you can and you learn the patterns, most importantly, whenever you see something different, something that hasn't been explored at all by me, that means the move was so bad, according to engine evaluation, that I couldn't even look at it or consider it or never saw it, and therefore never studied it. That means that the move is really bad, and you'll have to figure out the tactics from there. d5, take, pawn takes, okay, knight takes, pawn takes, queen h4, king e2. So we're looking at the variation with g5. Okay, as we know, we play d4. Okay, bishop to g4 check. Let's look at this idea. Knight f3. Bishop takes, we can't take with the king because otherwise queen h5 wins the game for black. Pawn takes, and after g4, f4. And this is an important move to play. g3 by white, double attack on pawn in h2. We can't take because the queen will take the rook. Bishop to g2, and white is much better. We're attacking the pawn in b7, so after c6, you recapture in g3, it's going to attack on the queen, so after queen takes the pawn in g3, simply bishop to f3. The idea is to develop the bishop, the queen, and then the rook is coming, and so on. Knight to d7, develop. Queen to d3. Castle. Bishop to e3. Remember, the black queen's got nowhere to go anyway. Okay, you might argue queen to g6, looking for a swap. f5, avoid the swap. Queen's got nowhere to go except, let's say, g7, f6. So again, queen to g6, rook a to g1. The queen is trapped, so she has to swap with us. Queen takes queen, pawn takes back. And white is much, much better. Knight to b6 by black. Okay, simply bishop to h5, target the weakness. This pawn is going to be taken. And it cannot be defended with rook d7 because you play c4, cutting off any possibility from the knight to go anywhere. Black can't develop anything. You'll have to develop the bishop to b4, for example, but that allows you to play rook g7 and finalize the attack on this pawn. If rook protects it, then you're taking the other pawn, so that doesn't help. If instead, after bishop to h5 attacking this pawn, what if black tries a counterattack, knight d5, attacking this pawn, attacking our bishop, trying to take our bishop pair at least. Okay, take the pawn in f7. And now these two pass pawns are going to win, so black will have to give up on the idea of just taking the bishop pair. Doesn't work. Knight c3 check, king to f3. Knight back to d5. Believe it or not, you take. Yes, you give up the bishop pair. Yes, everything I've told you so far since the beginning of my channel has been a lie. The bishop pair sometimes can be given away. So just learn the new information and move on. So rook takes d5, but now you play f7 with the idea of going rook to g8. We'll drop the line here. So let's go back a second and see this, the early bishop c5 move as a second move, is a move we've seen in the very first episodes of this saga. There's a variation that I wanted to show though. So after f4, and d6 and knight f3, black can play knight c6. So we have seen this a lot, but after knight a4 attacking the bishop going back, we know we have to play bishop b5, bishop to d7 to protect the knight, because we know that the idea here is to take the bishop, then take the knight, then take the pawn, and then take the other pawn. Play move like d3 to solidify the center, go up a pawn, and that's how we play it. Make sure you watch the other videos to understand more. After bishop d7, the more safe variation. The idea is that if we take the knight, black takes back with the bishop, and it comes with an attack on e4. So we have to play d3. And let's look at this move now. Queen to e7. The idea is that now black is already able to castle. The queen is also defending this pawn further, meaning that if we take, we no longer have a free pawn in e5 because black has two defenders. Okay, well, we take this bishop. Pawn takes back to put the rook on an open file. Castle. Knight f6 developing. Okay, pawn takes in e5. And now, let's look at two ideas. If knight takes back, the idea is to try to nullify the influence of this bishop, simply to improve the position of the knight, whatever, you just take the bishop with check. Seems like this can be taken in multiple ways. Well, okay, if knight f to d7, and knight to d4, I have a very simple idea. Knight to f5, the knight is sitting so strong in there. So let's make an example. Castle, you play knight f5. The knight's attacking the queen, queen to e6, defending, escaping. Okay, a4, knight to c6. Now here's the plan. If knight to c6, for instance, queen to g4, and you're winning, that's checkmate. This cannot be stopped in any way. I mean, if black plays g6, then knight to h6, check. And now king to g7 is wrong because you'll play rook to f7, check. If rook takes, then you can pick up the queen. If queen takes, then the knight's attacking that square. So obviously this is completely winning. So after knight h6 check, what if the king goes to h8? Now here you play knight takes f7. Again, the rook takes and black loses the queen. So in this position, instead of g6, what if queen to g6? Well, okay, knight h6 comes anyway. The queen can't take because the bishop is protecting the knight. So either way, even if the king moves or the pawn takes, let's say pawn takes, you're going to take in d7. And you're winning this endgame easily. Let's go back here where we took the bishop. What if black takes with this knight? Well, okay, again, knight d4, because the idea is to go knight f5. Let's look at this move now. g6 early on to stop knight f5. Well, okay, that's bad because of bishop a6. c5, kicking away our knight. Knight to b5, attacking c7. Knight to e5, improving the position of the knight and allowing the defense of c7. Bishop to g7 wins the game because we got double attack on this knight now and an attack on the rook. So in this position, in the variation with queen e7, we just castle, black playing knight f6, and we take the pawn in e5. What if black takes with the pawn? This looks a little bit safer. But still, you go on with a4, and after castle, b3. We're going to be applying pressure on the pawn in... The pawn in e5 cannot be supported by the pawn in d. You just want to play bishop b2, and then the two pieces attacking there. He's not going to be able to take... But it also depends, you're not going to be able to take straight away, but obviously you can take the knight first and then go for that square. It also depends on what the opponent does. If black plays this move to avoid all of that, because you're threatening take, and then you're threatening bishop b2 and take this pawn, yes, this can be defended with rook to e8, but the rook will be behind the queen. That means you can still take, you got two pieces. The black player is not going to give you a queen for a knight and a bishop. And if that happens, you're winning. So before you get the chance to take in c6, what if the knight goes to d4? How to deal with this? Okay, take. Pawn takes back, and now we're winning because we're not going to go through this diagonal anymore, but now that the pawn in e5 has been neutralized, you play bishop g5, you're playing the knight, you're going to win. h6 cannot happen, you will just take this knight. Pawn takes back, and then you're completely winning. You can take the bishop, the queen takes back, you're taking in f6, and I mean, come on. It's a joke. So in this position, what if black first takes the bishop? Okay, take the knight, it comes with an attack on the queen, so pawn has to take back, and now you simply recapture. And this is black having played the most solid moves in the queen e7 variation, but it's still over +2 the evaluation. We're going for a completely winning endgame because of this massive weakness on the f file, the two isolated pawns.